So now that I have cleared Heroic a few times, it's time for the Heroic Ellie Shaman guide, or normal, kind of the same thing. I will do a Mythic one once I've full cleared Mythic, but for now, just Heroic. If you're new here, I do this every tier, and it's not like a strategy guide, it's more like a talents suggestion kind of guide for Ellie Shamans and like little tips and tricks, so if you're an Ellie Shaman, you want some tips, stick around, otherwise, may not be what you're looking for. But anyways, guys, let's get going. So just a few general things to go over before we actually get into the bosses. Every time I suggest Ice Fury or Ascendance, you can just assume it's gambling if possible. Gambling being the combination of Aftershock, boots, and gloves. If you don't have gambling, then you can still just go Ice Fury and Ascendance, but obviously you can't gamble. Just know that the recommendation is kind of the same there, but it's always going to be favored towards gambling if you have the option. Another thing to note is if you don't have tier 21, ignore any Ice Fury suggestions, because Ice Fury will probably be worse. Actually, definitely be worse. So at tier 21, Ice Fury gets a little bit better and becomes pretty much on par with Ascendance, so you can use it or you cannot use it, up to you. But if you don't have tier 21, just ignore any Ice Fury suggestions, and if you aren't comfortable with Ice Fury, also ignore any Ice Fury suggestions, because it's a very complicated talent setup and only performs a tiny bit better, if that, than Ascendance. Very first boss, Garroth the Annihilator. This boss, single target boss, go Ice Fury or Ascendance, and the only other real tip I can give is to not try to chain lightning the cannons. I tried it, doesn't work, and otherwise, I guess, use Gusto and effectively to get out of the pushback thing, or like the suck-in thing or whatever he's doing, and otherwise it's just kind of a tank and svank, so enjoy the free loot. On Fellhounds, go Ice Fury or Ascendance. If you can, stand in between both the dogs so you can keep your flame shock on both of them, and during the orb that will pull you in, you want to be stutter stepping as much as you can, as in like you stop and cast Elemental Blast and then you run until Lava Burst is off cooldown, then you stop and cast that if you can, Gust of Wind, all that good stuff. Make sure you get as many of the important casts in as possible without actually putting yourself in danger. It's not an immediate need to move things, so you can be a little lenient with it. On Antorus High Command, I definitely recommend going Lightning Rod and Liquid Magma Totem. Make sure you pop SK, that being Stormkeeper, as soon as the ads spawn. Don't pop it on pull. Generally avoid using it if it's not like a fresh spawn, because often they teleport, but like they run out and start blade storming too far for chain lightning to cleave them, so you want to kind of get them out immediately. If they're running out too far for you to cleave them, you can also consider just getting the 3 Stormkeeper charges out before they run out, as in not spending Maelstrom. This is kind of not recommended if you have any chance of being able to chain lightning them, but if your ranges are very far back and they're running out every time, then it might be worth it just to get the charges out. Also, as far as legendaries, this one is not a gambling build one. You want to be using Sephuz if you can get the interrupts. If someone else in your raid group is using a Sephuz and is like quicker at interrupts than you, consider using Class Ring maybe for the extra single target damage when the ads are not there, or when there's only one in chain lightning range. And also consider the gloves, because you're still spending Maelstrom and Ascendance is still really good. The gloves are still really good. My personal combination on this boss was the gloves and Sephuz, but you could also consider a combination of Clash Ring or even Eye of the Twisting Nether in there. I would not recommend the wrists, because you aren't really using enough chain lightning, they're jumping out too much. I don't really think it's going to pay off. Portal Keeper Hazabel is a really similar boss to High Command. Lightning Rod, Liquid Magma Totem are my suggestions. If your raid leader is trying to tell you to do portals, tell them to not put you in portals, because you're an Ellie Shaman and your single target damage not that good. You have a bit of a ramp up, so you're not really good for the portals, but you have incredible AoE burst, you have constant AoE knockdowns and AoE stun, and a very short interrupt CD, so you're perfect for the imps. So definitely argue to be on the bottom. If the imps spawn and then the boss runs away with the black stuff and he drops the black, she drops the black stuff on the imps, that's a really good time to use Capacitor Totem or Lightning Surge Totem if you have it. Generally I save it for that, unless I'm trying to proc Sephuz or something, and you can just stun them out there because often they're out of range, and then you don't get blown up by all the casts getting off. And then another tip is if a certain set of cooldowns is being, or a certain set of imps is getting blown up super hard, you can save your cooldown, or one of your cooldowns, like use SK on the first one, Liquid Magma Totem on the second one, and then kind of go like that. Or if you have like multiple Ellie Shamans or something in your group, and they are completely destroying it, You can also use Stormkeeper and Liquid Magma Totem on the pole, and then use them on the second set of imps, and then every other one from there to kind of desync it from everyone else's cooldowns. Do what you think is necessary for your raid group. I kind of went back and forth on this, not really sure which one I wanted, or which one actually performed better for me. But it's kind of a situational thing. You have to decide on your own on that. As for legendaries, I definitely recommend Sefu's because it's really, really easy to proc. And my personal second was going to be gloves, but if you're having a lot of problems on imps, you might consider wrists. Otherwise, you could also go class string or either twisting nether. Any of that is good, or if you don't have any of those, then just kind of go with whatever feels best. For ENR, I suggest running Lightning Rod and Liquid Magma Totem again, and that's, I mean, there's not a whole lot of stuff going on ENR. You basically just AoE things when they're there. It's kind of chaotic, but it's really easy. Make sure you're using your crowd control if you need to, like Lightning Surge Totem, Earthbind Totem to stop them from getting to ENR. And if you want some style points, make sure to pop Stormkeeper, fly into the air, and fly towards the bats to chain lightning them in the air. Otherwise, enjoy your free loot from what is supposed to be a trash pull. For Iminar, I recommend going Ascendance or Ice Fury. I only have a couple tips for this boss. It's fairly simple. One tip, don't use your cooldowns or spend any Maelstrom if you have the gloves right before he flies away, because he's going to fly away and he's going to be gone long enough that if anything you pop, Ice Fury or Ascendance or Stormkeeper, anything is going to be gone by the time you get to him. And if you spend like 70 Maelstrom Earthshock and you're using Gambling Build or whatever, and you proc Ascendance, he's going to fly away and it's going to be wasted, so you're better off just keeping the Maelstrom and getting across the bridge and then using it. Of course you don't want to overcap, but if you're getting close to cap and he's about to fly away, just kind of let it go, as long as it's not actually going over. And don't try to gust the wind over any of the things on the bridge. It doesn't work. We're not mages. We don't have the luxury of being able to skip things. You'll just hit it in the air and then probably die. For King Garoth, I also recommend Ascendance and Ice Fury. If during the ad phase your group only kills one or none before they finish their initiation and get to the boss has a very large hitbox, so you can cast Chain Lightning on one of the ads, it'll go to the boss and then to the next ad, which is a really good Maelstrom generation and pretty good damage on the ad. You can funnel that into Earthshocks on one of the ads to really get rid of it as soon as possible. So if that does happen, definitely take advantage of your class fantasy there. And then another tip is, if as the bombs are spawning, the ones that roll around, whatever they're called, I think they're called bombs, balls, whatever they are, look where they're spawning and kind of like count it like as in a lane. There's like 3 lanes. There's like the inner lane right up against the boss, there's the middle, and then there's the outer. Take note of where they're spawning and then just pick the spot to stand where they aren't rolling around, so you can be safe and just kind of stand there. Really helps you minimize your movement. For Vera Mathras, I definitely suggest Ascendance and Ice Fury. And this boss is just kind of uneventful. If you do get Necrotic Embrace, I believe this is only on Heroic, definitely use Gust of Wind to make sure you aren't getting hit twice, because getting hit twice will probably kill you. So like you run out and then you Gust of Wind back in, or you Gust of Wind out when there's 2 seconds left or something. Just be careful, because if you don't get out in time, you will wipe the raid. And also, if you do end up out and you die, you can't really reincarnate. I haven't actually tried it, but I really, really believe that it would just smack you and kill you. So if that were to happen and you really wanted to get up, I guess you could just pray that our friendly raid people would come out and escort you back. But yeah, definitely save your Astral Shift for Necrotic Embrace if at all possible. Also, I believe Ghost Wolf is really good at negating the slow during the slow phase. So Coven of Shivara is the first boss that gets really interesting. On this boss, I suggest Ascendance and Ice Fury. There are 3 separate ad waves. There's the army one, which it's 4 separate ad waves, sorry. The army one that just walks at you. They have an invulnerable shield until they're done. If they run into you, you die. On these ones, you want to be using Earth Grab Totem to root them on the wall, and Thunderstorm to knock them to the wall, or condense them into like a corner or something. The like really good utility you have here. You can knock them into the corner, then root them there, and you have this big opening for everyone to go through. There's the lightning ones where you just spread out. There's only 4 of them, but I'm pretty sure you can chain lightning. It depends on where they spawn, I guess. I think you can chain lightning from the boss to the ad to the boss again, or rather the other boss. The fire ones, you can usually get 5 targets with this. At least I could with our boss positioning. So I actually saved SK for this if it was coming up, where it would spawn like there's the two bosses in the little corners of the side of the room, and there's one spawns on the left side of the bosses, one spawns in the middle, and one spawns on the right. You can chain lightning either the one on the right or the left, and it would go through the boss to the other ad, to the boss, and then to the next ad. So it's really, really good there. You get to get 5 target chain lightning in. Definitely save SK for that if you can. And then the last one is the healing one. I actually saved SK for this as well, because there's almost always one that spawns in between the bosses, depending where you have the bosses, I guess. But for our strat, there was always one that spawned in between the bosses, and that's 3 target chain lightning. Definitely worth saving it for, as long as you're, of course, not saving it over 1 minute. Also, another heroic tip is if you stand like right on the outside of the circle, the inner circle, there is almost always going to be a storm that spawns right around there. The storms pretty much, they're very predictable. They spawn right on the outside of that circle there. So you definitely want to, like, if you look on the video in the background, you'll probably see markers. We had those markers as like the really close to safe spots, so hover around that area as much as you can. Agrimar's a really, really cool boss as well, because it really gets you to use some rare abilities. So for Agrimar, I definitely suggest Ice Fury or Ascendant again. I definitely also suggest saving Stormkeeper, or if your guild takes a while to do the first phase, like one of our splits did, you can use Stormkeeper on pull and then just save it from there. But basically, you want Stormkeeper for the ad phases, because you can go from an ad to the boss to the other ad, for the big ads. And those are the ones you want to kill. Very important that you kill those. Normally you can kill them all, but on Heroic, if you kill the ads, they'll just come back and continue walking towards the boss, so you actually have to do them properly. But definitely make sure you have SK for that. I guess not make sure, but it's nice if you do. Then Earth Grab, really, really useful. 30-second root. It is broken by damage, but people should not be damaging those, so if it does break, not your fault. And it's kind of used as like an emergency thing. You have like the banishes, you have the druid roots that are watching it. Yours is a long cooldown, so yours is like a backup. If something forgets to get CC'd, like someone dies or something, you can drop your Earth Grab totem. You can even root 2 at a time, potentially. Then also Thunderstorm. You can Thunderstorm either direction, which is really useful. Like, if you don't have a Death Knight and you're trying to get one in right now, you can go Thunderstorm it in. Or if one gets loose and no one has a CC left for it, you can Thunderstorm it out. There's a lot of things that you can do in this boss that you wouldn't be used to doing, so make sure you have all that stuff keybound and everything, and have fun with the explosions, because they hurt. One thing to note about Agrimar is that rooting the ads does actually proc Sefus. So if you want to use Sefus on that boss and just like use Earth Grab Totem on cooldown, it's not really a bad idea, as long as you aren't rooting the one that's supposed to be getting brought in, because that would be kind of detrimental to the raid. But you can proc Sefus basically on cooldown during those phases. Just keep in mind you can't proc it out of that phase at all, so up to you if it's worth it or not. So Argus is actually a really fun boss, and there's a lot of little tips I can give you. There's a lot of stuff going on. Overall, it's fairly easy compared to the bosses just before it, like Agrimar and Coven. But either way, I definitely recommend Ascendance and Ice Fury on Argus. I don't think Lightning Rod would be very good. Both buffs are good in Phase 1, that being the Versatility Haste buff or the Crit and Mastery buff. It kind of depends on what you need, as in like sim your stat weights or whatever, and then go with what you have or need more, and then always try to continue to get the buff, the same buff, because it stacks and the duration refreshes, so you can go into the second phase with a 4 stack of whatever buff you got, but if you don't get it on one of the uses, you're not going to get that. Like, I've even popped Astral Shift and ran into the Cone of Death to get a buff because it got dropped in there, just to refresh it. Kind of dangerous, but a lot of damage. So definitely make sure you're getting a buff and you're getting the same buff repeatedly. During the ad phase, there will be all the immunity ads or whatever, or rather the invulnerability ads, or vulnerability ads, there we go. There's one for pretty much every element. There is something for every damage ability you have. What I personally do here is I always run Ascendance on this boss. I will set focus to the fire ad, the fire damage vulnerability ad. I have a focus Lava Burst macro and a focus Flame Shock macro. I keep Flame Shock on both the fire ad, and then I main target to nature ad. And every time Lava Burst stuff cooldown, I'll turn around and use my focus Lava Burst macro on the fire ad, and then flip back over and continue doing my normal rotation on the nature ad. If you're using Ice Fury, gets a little more complicated. I would probably do the same thing I just mentioned, but I would also have a mouse over macro for Frost Shock and Ice Fury to use on the Frost ad. It would get very complicated, but if you really wanted to maximize your damage and you were playing Ice Fury, that would be the way to do it. Also, make sure you pre-pot and then do your second pot sometime before you get killed, because it resets your potion cooldown. So you can get a total of 3 pots during the fight. And speaking of the death, don't reincarnate, because sometimes it resets the boss. Haven't actually experienced this myself, but I've seen it happen and I've had people tell me it happens. So don't even bother risking it until the boss is back. Or just release and run to the tree and then use Ankh later if you die. But be careful with reincarnate, because it might just reset the boss and ruin all the progression you got there. And then in the last phase, there will be the portal ads that spawn and start spreading the black stuff on the ground. If you see that one spawned on each side of the boss, try and chain lightning it, because the hitboxes are really big. I can't tell if they changed it or not. It felt like my second kill on my Shaman that the hitboxes got smaller, but I might have just been unlucky with spawns. So give it a shot. If it works, awesome, because then you get the 3-target chain lightning going. If not, then just go back to lightning bolting. It's not worth trying again. Anyways, guys, that concludes all of the bosses for Antorus, the Burning Throne. Again, I will be doing a Mythic version of this once I clear Mythic. Right now I'm 5 of 11 Mythic on the first week of Mythic. Today I'm currently recording this, it's Friday night after the first week of Mythic, or during the first week of Mythic. Currently 5 of 11, so I'm expecting to be 11 of 11 fairly soon, like within a couple months at worst, probably at worst 3 months or something. But as soon as I'm 11 of 11 Mythic, I'm going to do a guide just like this, but for Mythic. And also, I'm potentially planning to upload the video for the heroic clear that I'm taking all the background footage from. If you want to see that, you can check the channel. It might be up now, it might be up after this video is released. I don't know. It might never be up. Who knows? We'll find out. I'll probably leave a pinned comment or something if I decide to upload it. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you learned something. Like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys next time.